The Monaco Grand Prix, it's one of motorsport's greatest anachronisms, but we all love it, and from a tech talk point of view, something that's really special of all of the dedicated modifications the teams make to every single car. And to take a look at some of them and why they do it, I'm joined here by Craig Scarborough. But Craig, I thought I'd start with a bit of nostalgia, one of my favourite cars from the history of Formula One, not just because it's got a science fiction inspired name, the Tyrrell XWing. A few years back, Tyrrell came along to the Monaco Grand Prix with extra winglets fitted to their car, front, rear, and of course, those famous mid X-Wings. They were banned not long after, mostly on the grounds for being ugly, but I actually think they were wonderful. Craig, what are Tyrrell trying to do with this rather drastic looking car?
Well, you've actually got Max's dad, Jos Verstappen, here spinning a Tyrrell, which became a Mercedes. So a Verstappen and a Mercedes, that doesn't seem right somehow, does it? But what you've got here is the regulations basically set out lots of boxes where you can and can't have bodywork. And in those days, there were lots of loopholes in it, and you was allowed to fit wings far outboard and quite high up on the car that gave you downforce, which is just what you need in Monaco. Regulations now are much, much bigger because we've had to close off all of these loopholes that people have found over the years.
It's a little bit of a shame those loopholes have been closed down, but it does mean that there are lots of detailed updates on the cars as the teams still try to get the most out of the aerodynamic performance of their cars around Monaco, and 2021 is no different. So we'll take a start with McLaren. McLaren at the Spanish Grand Prix, actually, a couple of weeks back, introduced a new front wing to their car, and you can see the differences not just on the upper elements but also on the main plane of the wing. It's a slightly different shape on this outer element, just where they want to get that vortex running on that Craig's spoken about quite a lot previously. The other detail to have a look at are these strakes just under the wing. It's not highlighted here, but they've introduced a new shape of strake. Those are super important. They work a bit like vortex generators underneath an aeroplane's wing, and change the shape of that, you're really changing the flow structure around the front wing. But that's not all McLaren were playing with. They've also introduced a new floor onto the car as well. You can see that stepped section, those two sticky uppy bits in the middle of the floor. It bulges out though a little bit towards the rear tyre, and that's a bit of a trend we're seeing up and down the grid. So we'll say why it's such a trend. Well, let's take a look at the Alfa Romeo. They've been following pretty much the same trend. There's the original straight floor with two sticky uppy bits in the middle, but let's have a look what they brought along for the Monaco Grand Prix, Craig. A brand new specification of floor with this little kink in the middle and a bulge out towards the back. This trend now is becoming pretty much universal in F1.
Well, it is. With Alfa Romeo turning up at Monaco with a stepped floor, that effectively means 9 teams are now running this setup, which leaves just Haas. We know that Haas have no intentions of developing that car, so that's it for this year. Anything else that's going to be working in this area, right now everyone's got the step, is just going to be down to the number of sticky up bits that they put there.
We have seen some more developed floors in testing. We saw AlphaTauri with that Z-shaped floor. We haven't actually seen it on the car yet. Will it ever appear on the car? I thought maybe it was a low drag floor for Spa and Monza, so perhaps as we get onto those races we'll see some more. But we are going to see a lot more development in this area. This isn't it for the season now, is it?
No, this isn't it. As I say, the development here now is that they've got the basic shape and the basic flow structures, and what everyone will be doing is just modifying everything else around it to get it working exactly as they want. So you'll have all the little vanes and the fins, the details around the tyres, but then equally the barge boards, and as you saw with the McLaren with the front wing, just playing with it to make the most of what is now potentially the best solution out there.
Now, you mentioned the vanes and the fins, and that wasn't a reference to one of the Alfa Romeo drivers. That was more of a reference to some of the changes the teams have been making on the barge boards of the car. Alfa Romeo turning up in Monaco with a modified barge board. Many other teams have adjusted their sort of vertical protruding elements from the front of the car quite significantly. Alfa made a pretty minor change there, but it'll make a significant difference downstream onto the sticky uppy bits on the floor. But those aren't necessarily Monaco specific changes. The real Monaco changes, they are very clear to see at the rear of the car. And here we can see a whole bunch of these big rear wings and T-wings on the car. Now, Craig, The T-Wings, there's a funny story about that, because how did they become legal when everything else was? Well, there was a very thin section in the technical regulations, and I believe that when the people drafting the technical regulations actually made a little mistake and allowed these T-Wings to be allowed to be installed. That's the width of the old Formula One rear wing, and that's when it's a massive difference to these new wide wings that I think look wonderful, but they're much, much bigger on these cars, and that isn't particularly aerodynamically efficient. Here on the Alpine, it's almost vertical. Yeah,
so the rear wing is, the best and the worst part of a Formula One car, apart from perhaps the open wheels that you obviously have to have, as that's a core part of the formula. And they produce some 25% of the car's overall downforce, which is a large proportion. Obviously, most of it is in the floor. But they also can produce over 30% of the drag on the car. And this means that you could be quick in the corners. If you've got a big wing, you're slow on the straights.
And this is what we talk about when you hear us talking about dirty downforce. These big, almost Hanford-style vertical rear wings create a lot of aerodynamic drag, but they do work in terms of generating downforce. Now, if you ran a wing like this at Silverstone, a high-speed, high downforce circuit, you might as well stick a parachute out the back, because it's going to hang you out all the way down the hangar straight. You're going to be held back. But this is something we're seeing specifically. Now, you've highlighted a few individual trends on these dirty downforce wings, not efficient downforce wings.
Exactly. So if we can just have a look at one of the drawings that I've done. So this is a fairly conventional rear wing for a generic F1 car, and you want to have a balance of downforce but low drag. So what happens is you have obviously high pressure above the wing, low pressure below, and when it reaches the end of the end plate here at the wingtip, you get these big vortices that we see on damp days, and in the old days they used to show that the wing was really good and it was working, but these are actually creating lots of the drag. So when the teams want to find a way of creating downforce but reduce drag, they tend to reduce either the chord, the length of the wing, or the angle of attack of the wing towards the wingtips. And you get these what we call spoon-shaped wings, and you get little details indented at the back here, and that helps reduce the drag, but while still producing a relatively high amount of downforce. When you come to a circuit like Monaco, Hungary would be one of the other ones, which are very sensitive to drag, then you want to change the wing. So if we have a look at the next one that we've got.
Well, this is the point. This is what we were talking about, aerodynamic efficiency. So high downforce, low drag. That's an efficient wing.
That's what you want.
That's what you want, but it doesn't always generate the maximum amount of downforce, does it?
Exactly. So when you come to a circuit where drag has a much smaller sensitivity on the track, it's not as big a problem, like Monaco, for example, that we're talking about here, then you want to crank everything you can on. Now, as we've seen in the old days, you used to be able to stick wings everywhere, and you can't. So most teams will now create more downforce with a T-wing. Some of them may fit what we call the monkey seat, or a Y100 winglet, as us techies like to call it, above the exhaust. That's quite limited now, but you did see a few of the teams that are doing that this weekend. But then with the rear wing, now again, we keep talking about these regulatory boxes for putting bodywork in. The rear wing has a maximum width, a maximum depth, and maximum length. So with a Monaco wing, you're now creating that wing to fill that box, so you don't get the changes in shape at the front leading edge. You don't get the dips at the trailing edge of the flap as well. So you're maximising the downforce that that wing can produce. And this comes with a huge drag penalty. As you say, you wouldn't be able to run it at a medium or even kind of moderately high downforce circuit like Barcelona, for example. So you have to run these, and this is what we call dirty downforce. And it's kind of fun, but it has its purpose only at a few circuits.
It's low speed, low average speed, it's dirty, and we love it. It's the Monaco Grand Prix, and I hope you enjoy it.